I take refuge in this. Put the palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Nice to see you all. Glad you're here. On a Saturday morning, apparently nothing else to do, so thanks for showing up. Anyone here for the first time? Those of you who are here for the first time, what brings you here?
Looking to try something new.
Something new? So you just Google something new and it popped up?
I came with some friends.
Okay, all right. Figured there had to be a little more than that. You know? What else? Couple hands.
I'm in a sociology class, and the professor is Catherine Bradford, and
Oh, nice.
she recommended and this an option, and we chose to come in person.
How's she doing? I haven't seen her. I used to go there every year to speak, but I haven't seen her since pandemic, a couple of years.
I think she's ready to do Zoom.
Still Zoom, yeah.
She was able to go through surgery that seemed successful.
Okay.
So that's really good.
Yeah, I haven't actually. I'll reach out to her. It's been about 3 years, but yeah, I would go up there about twice a year. Oh, welcome. Hands I saw anywhere.
Lisa and I usually practice on Saturday mornings with Insight San Diego.
Beautiful.
And Lisa said she missed coming here. She's been here in the past. I've never been, and so we thought this would be something interesting and fun to do for a change.
Well, welcome. I'll try to keep it fun. Always nice to see Lisa back here.
Thank you.
A couple other hands I saw. Anybody wants to share? Yeah.
My dear friend told me about it, and I was intrigued.
Nice. It's always the friends. They ruin it for you, I'm telling you. Yeah. Anyone else want to share? Yeah, you want to be careful about coming for a school assignment, because I had come to a friend 19 years ago who had to explore practice somewhere. And she said, Jeff, you always talk about being Buddhist and you think you're Buddhist and you read Buddhist stuff, but you've never been to a temple. 19 years later, I'm still sitting here, so be careful what you sign up for, you know. Yeah, we never really know what to expect anywhere we show up. And I think that's the beauty of this practice, which is really just a reflection of something to take into our lives every single day. And most of our struggles, challenges, the Buddha called it dukkha, suffering, discomfort, angst. Most of our challenges in our lives truly come from us showing up somewhere and having an expectation or an idea of how it's supposed to go. I mean, if you think about any challenges or conflicts in your life at any moment, what's actually occurring is different from how you want it to be. Therefore, we struggle. And so there's a phrase known as beginner's mind, and the teaching behind that from Suzuki Roshi's Zen Mind and Beginner Mind is the text, is that everything you show up as if it's the first time you've ever been there. Now, for those of you who are brand new, that's really easy because you've never been here, so you don't know what to expect, right? Maybe you have some ideas. Maybe if you have a practice, right? It's great when people show up when they have a practice, because then they have X amount of practice time here and place here. And then what happens when we show up to a new place? Very often, what do? Compare. Ever go to a restaurant and like the pizza, and then you go to a next restaurant the next week, and then you sit down and you're like, well, this pizza's okay, but I really preferred that other one, you know? Instead of just appreciating the pizza. So all this stuff we talk about in here, in this kind of Buddhist world and in a Buddhist temple and around Buddhist practice, it really has nothing to do with Buddhism at all. It has to do with you and your life, and how you reflect these teachings into your life. And if every time we eat pizza, we eat as if we've never had it before. I know, right? It's always my go-to because it's just my weak spot. And then we just can enjoy it. And anytime we have a conversation with a friend that maybe is difficult, and we go into it without carrying 14 years of baggage into that conversation, then we can just appreciate that moment. But this is really hard to do. Anyone having a conflict or problem with someone in their life right now? Only 2 of you, phenomenal. 2 people and a bunch of liars we're filled with, right? So if we think about that conflict that you're exploring in your life right now, or you're being challenged with in your life right now, there's a lot of stuff you're carrying with that. A lot of past experiences, a lot of stories, a lot of highs and lows, a lot of challenges, a lot of difficulties. And so when you engage with this person in whatever manner it is, it's very difficult for us to just be present with them because we carry so much with us. And what we carry with us throughout our lives can really beat us down pretty bad emotionally. And it becomes very difficult to set down a lot of these things that we're carrying. And so again, beginner's mind really is, ultimately, it's beyond setting down what you're carrying. And why is that? What would be the reason you don't have to set anything down?
In our minds.
No, what's that?
It's not real, it's only in our minds.
Well, that works too, but that wasn't where I was going.
You don't pick anything up.
You don't pick it up. It's real simple. So now that I've clarified all of that for you in the first 10 minutes, everything else should be easy from here. So we'll start with the meditation practice. To those millions of people joining us virtually, you can thank Travis later for setting this up. A couple things I'll tell you before we sit. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences. You're not going to figure anything out whatsoever. The mind that races all day long isn't going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right? Are you doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Don't expect anything. If you're waiting for some grand aha moments, or if you're trying to shut your mind off and think nothing, you'd end up sitting there telling yourself, think nothing, think nothing, think nothing, and that's still thinking. So your mind is going to race. I'll say things periodically to remind you that you're lost in thought, to wake you up, or to bring you back to the present moment. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Same thing if you're on a bench or a chair, however you're seated. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap. Sitting up straight. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, once again, do not expect anything from this practice. We are just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice. Observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, release that thought, return to breath. Breathing in. Follow breath in. Breathing out. Follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments of the practice. Just sitting. Breathing. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move, the most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout the day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, and disturbed by no one. This is not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation is not an escape, as often people think it is. It's direct perception into the present moment. And that present moment is quite often pretty difficult. Meditation doesn't fix things. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, it helps you become aware of why it is that way. When you allow yourself some time to sit quietly, breathe, and just let everything settle, then you look at the nature of your life, what you think all day long, what you say all day long, and what you do all day long. When you begin to make changes in those areas, your life will change. Going to meditation and sitting quietly and breathing doesn't change much, but it creates the space and opportunity for you to reflect on what you might need to change. Unfortunately, it requires us to be completely honest with our own mess, which I know all of you love so much. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's not a business. It's a way of life. It's becoming aware of what you think, say, and do every moment. And being mindful of how those actions, that's what the Buddha called karma, body, speech, mind, what we think, what we say, and what we do. We become aware of what we think, what we say, and what we do, and how that impacts the people around us. So with that, I'll pause. For me, I really just prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that you're sitting with, and we'll use the rest of our brief time this morning, and I'll respond to what's on your mind. And to those joining virtually, again, welcome. Feel free to say hello. There's a chat box there on the screen somewhere. If you type a question in, I'll do my best to respond to that as well. So we'll open up to thoughts, questions. Yeah, that was quick. Did you come in with that one? Were you waiting for the last 41 minutes to ask it? Go for it.
So my question has to do with right speech and probably right action, related to a situation I was in a couple of weeks ago. So I didn't actually carry it for 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's not bad.
It was a social situation, pleasant conversation that turned into a gossip session. And I felt really uncomfortable, and whenever somebody would talk smack about someone else, I would say, well, I like so-and-so because of whatever. And I felt like I was deflecting all of these things. And it suddenly occurred to me that's what they were into doing. And I didn't have any control over it, but I felt really uncomfortable. And so I just sat there feeling uncomfortable the whole time, trying to think of how I could get out of there. And so I think to do better next time would be to say something like, I'm not feeling comfortable with how this conversation is going. What are people doing for Thanksgiving? Would that have been more skillful?
Let me ask you this. Was it, with just to clarify, was it you and one person, or was it multiple people?
There was like 5 people altogether.
And in that situation, everybody was talking about somebody else.
Everybody was, yeah. Except I wasn't.
Thank you all for sharing your thoughts on what you think about this person. Good to know.
So then everyone else, everyone.
And then when you walk away, they'll talk about you.
It still doesn't feel good how I feel.
It's not supposed to feel good. But that makes it about you. So you want to practice right speech and practice. I'll come back. Let me finish this thought, and I'll come back to that to clarify what that is for those who don't know. But you want to practice right speech, and you want to work on no gossip, no slander, but you also want to feel good about doing that. The only reason you don't feel good about doing that is because it's so contrary to what we've done most of our lives, which is just engage in the gossip and slander. That's what we're used to. And now we're making ourselves vulnerable, and we're actually opening ourselves up to being the one that they talk about when we walk away. I'm sure many cultures and religious groups are like this, or maybe not, but we always joke, being raised Jewish and hanging out with they call it Havara, our Jewish group. We always say you never want to be the last, you never want to be the first ones to leave. Because as you walk out the door, then the 12 people became 10, and then the 10 people are talking about those 2, and then it just goes from there. So you want to be the last one standing, let me back up for a minute just to put some context to it. So the question around right speech, without drawing this out too far, in Buddhist teachings, very simply, you have the first thing the Buddha taught, Four Noble Truths. First one is life is suffering, dukkha, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. It doesn't mean all of life sucks. It just means that we're going to struggle a lot. The second one is the cause of suffering. He said we suffer because of greed, anger, ignorance. We want more, we're angry at how things are, and we're ignoring the truth. In other words, we think the world revolves around our perception. Newsflash for us, it doesn't, okay? It goes how it goes, and then we perceive it. So we practice generosity, compassion, wisdom to overcome greed, anger, ignorance. The third noble truth is the ending of suffering. Nirvana, samsara, call it a happy day. And the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path. And this is really what the question is about, looking at the practice of correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. Okay, and I run through that really quickly. You can Google that, Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Path. Stay on the first 3 pages of Google searches and you'll be totally fine with just about anything you read there. In fact, reading 15 different translations of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path is really beneficial, because then you don't attach to thinking that one person knows the right way, because they're all just making it up, right? Just as I am. But what this specifically is addressing is right speech. And so Buddha taught very clearly about right speech, to refrain from gossip, to refrain from slander, to refrain from divisive speech. Now, again, he was referring at that time specifically to the community, the Sangha, anything that would drive kind of a wedge between the community. There's a great thing up at Meadow Forest Monastery, and I think it says, Travis or Jonathan know too, is it necessary? Is it timely? What does that thing always say? Is it necessary? Is it timely? Is it true?
More or less.
More or less. We'll work with that.
Yeah. The sign says, before you speak, wait, which is an acronym for why am I talking?
There you go. Why am I talking? Right. No. Yeah, that'll mess up a lot of your days. So I wanted to give context to it, but coming back to that example specifically, and I mean that very genuinely, that when you practice these things, it will make a lot of people uncomfortable because they're not used to that. When you become the one person that is no longer gossiping and slandering somebody else, they don't like that. That's their issue, not yours. Right? And your potential, again, I'm just kind of guessing here, but the potential discomfort that we feel when we choose that side of, I'm not going to join in on the fun of picking on this person, we then potentially feel uncomfortable because now they all are viewing us and thinking, well, is this person better than I am? I'm not better than you are. I just prefer not to gossip and slander somebody. That's probably your friend in other areas of your life, but because they're not here, we can gang up and talk about them. Really difficult to do these things. And again, this isn't applying to the situation at all, but very often, well, it is, but I don't mean it towards you. Very often in practice, what we find ourselves doing, or I think as we continue to cultivate this practice, is we find ourselves spending time around different people. We find ourselves going to different places because maybe the way that we were living and doing life before was a big part of why we're suffering so much. And to unplug from something or some group of people or some friends that might just be comfortable for us, but also have a level of, toxicity to it, is something to explore. And I spend almost all of my life just talking about other people and putting them down. Maybe that should change. And it's still hard. No idle chat. I mean, if you look at the precepts, no idle chatter. Well, that sounds boring. I remember the very first time that Thanissaro Bhikkhu, Ajahn Jeff, came here. And, he lives by the Vinaya, is an American-born Buddhist monk, runs Meadow Forest Monastery, trained in Thailand, follows the precepts, the Vinaya, the code of conduct to the T. And I remember the first time he came here and I was sitting in the back, actually right on that back bench with him. And I was like, oh, he's not really here to make small talk. You know? And that can be uncomfortable at first. And when you're with somebody, why is that uncomfortable? What are you actually afraid of? Silence. Why are we afraid of silence so much? When we're silent, what are we left with? Us. Oh, that sucks. So here's a practice for you, right? Do this with a friend, could be a, intimate relationship person, could be a friend, could be whoever. Have a meal with them in silence. And not because you're angry and in a fight, but just sit with them. Just be with somebody silently and enjoy a meal. See what that's like. It'll be really odd if you've never done it before. One of my favorite stories from my mom coming back from the monastery, and I told her that we would all eat, there'd be like 3,000 monks and nuns, and we're all eating in silence. And that just like blew her mind, And she said, well, if you're all eating the same thing, if you all look the same, meaning you all have a shaved head, and you're all wearing the same thing, meaning you're all in robes, she said, well, if you look the same, you're eating the same thing, and you're wearing the same thing, what else are you going to talk about? So another practice for all of us today is just watch when you leave here today, how much time you spend talking about somebody else, including the guy who is talking to you about this right now. So, yeah. If we truly don't care what other people think of us, it's a lot easier to put these teachings into practice. But our ego says, well, no, I want to be included. I don't want to be left out. I don't want to be the one that they think is, thinking they're better than they are. We're not better than they are. We're just choosing at that moment to not participate. And that's okay too. Other questions?
Does prayer fit in to this practice or this philosophy? And if it does, how and when and why?
Yeah. Does prayer fit into this practice and philosophy? If so, how, when, where, why? Yes and no. Meaning, the short answer is if it's important to you and you begin to explore Buddhist teachings in a certain manner, in a cultural way, and it becomes important to you in your life and your practice, absolutely. If it doesn't, then no. To expand on that a little bit, without kind of going into the whole history of Buddhism, Buddhism for 2,500 years has spread from India down south, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, China, Japan, Korea, Tibet. I mean, it's gone all over the world for 2,500 years and meshed with cultures. And Buddhist practice is a very devout, in most Buddhist cultures, religious, faith-based practice. You know what most people come into Buddhism in the West are running from? Everything I just said. So there's a word in Buddhism, it's called upaya. It means skillful means. So the upayic, the verb of upaya, way to introduce Buddhism in Western culture is not through prayer and ritual and bowing and chanting and robes and offering incense, because most of you, 99% of you, are not here for that. You're here because you want to figure out, how do I keep these friends and not gossip, right? And if I said to you, go pray to the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin for an answer, that's probably not going to help you much. But you know what people all over the world are doing? Praying to the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin for an answer. It doesn't mean anything to you specifically because it's not how we were raised, right? But I know for me, coming from Taiwanese Buddhism, very much ingrained in that temple way, for me personally, there is a tremendous amount of prayer. And every single day, praying to Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. May all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of all time and all space and all directions hear my cries every single day, multiple times a day. And there are bodhisattvas, specifically a medicine Buddha for health and healing, the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin for compassion, the Bodhisattva Manjushri for wisdom. All of that stuff exists. But very directly, we started the Dharma Bum Temple, 15 years ago, to pull away from the cultural overlay of Buddhism because it tended to turn a lot of people off to it. And then those who are interested in it can kind of explore that on a deeper level if they choose to. But most people come into Buddhism in this culture aren't coming here for religious practice, right? I mean, I do this all the time where I say, show of hands, how many of you are Buddhist? And there'll be like 2 hands up, and then a third that's like not quite sure, like, maybe, depends on Wednesday, when I go to my loving kindness thing, I'm Buddhist, but other than that, I'm just what, right? So it just depends for people. And the important thing for me as a practitioner is not about being Buddhist. And that's what the Dalai Lama said. Someone asked him years ago, does this country need more Buddhists? And his response was, the world has enough Buddhists. We're good. This country just needs more people that are peaceful and happy. But to think, just because it resonates in your minds potentially that Buddhism is just a philosophy and just a way of life, that's fine for you to have that belief. But that can potentially be insulting and disrespectful to Buddhists all over the world, in Taiwan, Thailand, Japan, places like that, where Buddhism is really deeply ingrained in the culture and in the way of life. That would be like walking into the Catholic Church down the street and saying, well, this isn't a religion, it's a way of life. How you practice Buddhism and how you use it is up to you. Because there is no God, per se, in Buddhism. The Buddha died. If you're brand new to Buddhism, he was a prince. He died when he was 80, 2,500 years ago, and he cannot help you. You're on your own. He cannot save you. He cannot fix you. But I find faith really beautiful and important. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
Just speaking of bodhisattvas.
Yes.
Do all bodhisattvas know they're bodhisattvas?
Do all bodhisattvas know they're bodhisattvas? I have no idea. You'd have to ask a bodhisattva.
Well, are you a bodhisattva?
No. Definitely not. Yeah. Yeah. My master always said the best way to know that someone is not a bodhisattva is if they walk around saying that they're a bodhisattva. The bodhisattva intention for me is what's really important here. It's not about being a bodhisattva or not being a bodhisattva. It's the bodhisattva, and I mean this very seriously. It's the bodhisattva vow. The bodhisattva vow, the bodhisattva precepts. The vow is to be reborn. And if you're not into rebirth, it doesn't matter. You can still learn about Buddhism. Just think about rebirth as waking up every day. The bodhisattva vow is to be reborn, life after life, until all sentient beings are free from suffering. That's a very serious vow. And one that the people who practice the bodhisattva teachings take very seriously. Definitely 100%. But a bodhisattva vow is very different from being a fully enlightened being. Yeah. Does that help? Oh, perfect. I've probably never answered one of your questions. And yet you keep coming back, that's so great. Other thoughts, questions? So there's a question here. Hi, Jeff. I just ended a relationship of 6 years and I feel a great deal of anger, sadness, and loneliness. The anger is around wondering why it didn't work, even though I wanted it to. What can I do? There's we often want to understand why things happen. And to understand why things happen so we don't potentially make same mistakes again, we learn from them in life is really important, right? I think on this path, we can explore our own levels of greed, anger, ignorance, our own levels of pride, our own levels of ego, our own levels of attachment. if we can explore that in our lives, in or out of relationships, those things are really important to improve upon. Very often when we find ourselves in relationships, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, whether it's an intimate, romantic partner relationship, those people become very often reflections and mirrors for us because we're challenged a lot. And the teaching of impermanence tells us that everything comes together for a short period of time and then ceases to exist. And I get it, that can sound kind of depressing, right? But that's the truth. The truth is we all come together for a period of time. Every person, place, and thing in our life is temporary. And we don't know when we lose them. We don't know when we lose it, right? Whatever the thing may be or whatever the person may be. We don't know when it ends. But it will end, right? You can be married for 70 years. At some point in time, somebody will pass. You could know somebody for 7 minutes and never see them again. And that interaction will never occur again. Part of the challenge is that our minds want to understand everything. One of my favorite quotes is from Einstein, and it says, "You can't solve the world's problems with the same mind that created it." So very often we can find ourselves in relationships with challenges, with struggles, with difficulties. Quite potentially, some of them, I'm sure none of you, but some of them might be your own fault. And then it doesn't work. And fault's the wrong word, responsibility. And when it doesn't work, we're using that same mind to try to understand it. Understanding it doesn't necessarily fix it or change it. You mentioned here the words of a great deal of anger and sadness and loneliness, and definitely, I feel for you. 6 years is a long time to be with somebody and to have that end. And that's incredibly painful and brings on a lot of anger, sadness, loneliness, depression. Many of us in this room, if not all of us, have been there at some point in our lives. So, I definitely feel and can intimately connect and relate to that pain. But what I can tell you is just, all I'm seeing is like 5 sentences on the screen here without any emotion. I don't get to see your tears. I'm not it's not much to go on here other than the way you write this. It almost tells me that you really want to try to figure it out to bring it back together. My suggestion is to explore your role, your responsibility, your actions in what led to challenges and difficulties in the relationship, but not with the intention to get it back. Simply with the intention to get to know why you do what you do. And if it returns, it returns. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But the constant clinging and attaching and craving and desire, which is the Buddha said why we suffer, craving and desire. The craving and desire to want things to be different from how they are will just make that loneliness and sadness and depression even deeper. And every moment, and again, this is something I think most of us can relate to, I'm just assuming or guessing, every moment we spend thinking about past anger, past loss, past regret, things like that, it's going to happen. We're human. We have emotions. We're going to wander to 3rd grade and think, why did that happen? Right? We're going to wander when we were to 15 and think oh, if I had just not done that, and then we're 24 and you're like, why did I leave? All these lifelong things are going to happen. That's a part of the journey. But trying to make sense of all of it with the mind that is clouded with greed, anger, and ignorance is going to be really difficult. But if we can see it clearly for our role in it, it does allow us to learn and then hopefully not repeat same behavior moving forward. And every moment, this is where I was going with that initially, every moment that we're stuck in the past, we're missing beautiful opportunities of what's in front of us today and what could be waiting for us. It's another great Joseph Campbell quote I always ruin, but it's something about, we have to be willing to let go of the life we were holding on to embrace the life that's waiting for us. So, yeah. And so your last question of what can you do? I'll close with this thought. Be with that pain, be with that sadness, be with that loneliness, be with that anger. And the other beautiful thing about impermanence is it also works towards emotions that are really difficult, because that anger, that sadness, that loneliness, that too shall pass. And try to laugh, try to find beauty in life that's around you. And with each passing day, hopefully things get a little easier. So I hope that's helpful. All right, so we'll join palms as we close. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to more than 6 million lives that have been lost during this pandemic, their family and friends who continue to suffer to this day. To Paul, during his time of rebirth, and Martina, who suffers at this time, and to Venerable Isur during her time of rebirth. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. So a few quick announcements before you head out. Thank you all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. So every night we have different practices, just about every night, going on with different people leading from their own Buddhist tradition. We have a large recovery sangha, so anybody battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, whatever it might be, that meets a few times a week as well. We have a day of silence. That's the first Saturday of the month. So if 20 minutes of silence is absolute torture for you, I strongly suggest you try it for 4 hours. Most people I know have made it through it. So 4 hours of being with yourself is a really wonderful practice. It makes everything else that much easier. A few kind of out of the ordinary things. Thanksgiving, we've had for 12 years our food redistribution program, where we pick up food that would be wasted and thrown away. We go downtown and we feed some of the 10,000 people that are sleeping on the streets every night. That's been on hold for 2.5 years due to the pandemic. We were closed for 16 months straight anyways, but that's been on hold for over 2 years, and that is coming back. It's our last kind of program we're going to bring back. We've been very sensitive to bringing that back for many, many reasons. But it'll start on Thanksgiving. We always had an annual Thanksgiving food redistribution program where we'd meet here Thursday morning, or when we were downtown for 10 years, and we prepare food and then we head downtown, we pass it out. In the newsletter or social media, there'll be some announcements. It's going to be a little bit different this year. Downstairs dining area, we normally would pack like 70, 80 people in there, and I'm pretty sure none of us want to be in a space like a tenth of this size with 70, 80 people. So we're going to limit the downstairs to 25 people from 10 to 11:30, and then everybody else can come at about 11:15. We'll meet out front, and we can all then go downtown together. We'll have plenty of food. Anybody wants to bring new socks, please don't clear out your sock drawer and go buy new socks. And we laugh, but you'd be surprised. New socks, hand sanitizer. Our homeless, our Knit and Sit homeless hats group has knitted over like 1,000 beanies in the last year, so we'll be passing out probably about 100 of those on Thanksgiving. So just keep an eye out for kind of further detail on RSVP for that. And then the weekly food redistribution will return in the second week of January. And that'll be every Thursday at 5 o'clock. And that's a beautiful practice of just showing up. We make sandwiches, and then we head downtown. So, and then Couple other things, we're looking at starting a new Recovery Dharma program. So if anyone is familiar with Recovery Dharma, it's a very specific Buddhist recovery group. We're going to add that to our already existing recovery programs, and also a Sangha social group, which is brand new to us. It's really wonderful that you all came here. You sat, you listened to me yap at you for a while, you asked a few questions, and then you go. But one of the things we've always loved over the years is things where people actually like food redistribution, where people get to actually get to know each other and build friendships and things like that amongst the community. So we're going to start a new thing once a month where we'll have a committee that will plan events for the year, and it'll be stuff outside of temple. So we're not responsible for your behavior, whether it's a trip to a temple or monastery,
Yeah.
whether it's, you want to go to the park and have a picnic, whether you have a bowling night, whatever, that'll all be, worked out over the next few weeks. But it'll be nice to add that. And I'm sure there's other stuff, but I'm tired of talking. So, yeah.
Could whoever parked their car in the alley parking lot, the blue car, could you move it once the class is over? And in general, don't park in the alley for the class, you can park across the street.
Mm-hmm. The neighbors get really upset because we block that alleyway.
Yeah, the neighbor can't leave.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And on that note, there's a lot of people here. There's always a lot of people here. We have no cleaning crew. We are the cleaning crew. So some people meet outside to sweep and rake and water. And there's a list by the door if anybody wants to wipe some door handles down or clean or anything like that. We really appreciate it. Buddha for you is downstairs if you need anything. So thanks all for being here. Wish you well.